Throughout the long history of modern competitive sport, dating back to the late 19th century, the chief difference between pioneering sportswomen and their male contemporaries is that every barrier in women's sport has been broken in the face of patriarchal assumptions of female inferiority. This harsh truth makes a mockery of that most banal of claims that sport and politics don't mix. Only in the rarest of female athletes, however, do they gel quite so cohesively as to become inseparable from one another. American Annie Smith Peck, scholar, suffragist and mountaineer, provides an outstanding example of just such an athlete. Annie was born in 1850, the youngest of 4 children, into a wealthy family in Providence, Rhode Island. She would not achieve sporting celebrity, however, until her mid-30s. Her formative years were spent fighting for the right to enjoy the same educational opportunities as her trio of elder brothers, each of whom were successful graduates of Brown University. Prevented by her gender from attending Brown, Annie, undeterred, moved to Michigan, where she worked as a high school Latin teacher. By her mid-20s, however, her thirst for higher learning could no longer be sated. Confronting her father in an emotive letter in which she plaintively asked why you should recommend for me a course so different from that which you pursue or recommend to your boys, she enrolled to study classics at the University of Michigan, one of the earliest colleges to open its doors to women, graduating with honours and completing a master's degree specialising in Greek before embarking upon an academic career in classical languages and archaeology that would take her all over the world. It was whilst pursuing her studies overseas that Annie first discovered her love of mountaineering. She began conservatively, ascending Cape Mazzino in Italy in 1884, before scaling a number of smaller peaks in Greece, Switzerland, and back home in the United States. In 1895, she became one of the first women to conquer the Matterhorn and spent much of the next 15 years journeying across South America, where she became the first woman to climb Mount Huascarán in the Andes of Peru, whose northern peak would later come to bear her name. In the early 1900s, she actively competed for altitude world records against fellow trailblazer Fanny Workman, their very public rivalry flying in the face of the traditional image of women as meek and self-effacing, whilst simultaneously publicising their courage, fortitude and athleticism. Indeed, so bitter was their rivalry that after Annie's ascent of Mount Huascarán was declared a world record for a female climber, Workman petulantly paid another team of engineers out of her own pocket to remeasure the climb, and unsurprisingly reached the partisan conclusion that she was still the world record holder after all. For Annie, though, mountaineering was not an end in itself. She published and lectured prolifically on the geography, economy and culture of the places she visited. For her exertions, she was elected a Fellow of the Royal Geographical Society in 1917, and in 1928 was formally recognised by the grateful Peruvian government for her compilation of biographical and industrial data and her ascents to the lofty summits of the Peruvian Andes. It should be emphasised that Annie, despite her middle-class upbringing, was not independently wealthy in the style of her great rival, Fanny Workman. She was constantly scrounging for sponsors to support her next climb, was actively discouraged from her career choice by her disapproving family, and raised funds primarily by giving widely popular public lectures about her exploits. In so doing, she became one of the great media darlings of her day, perceptively utilising her celebrity status to challenge patriarchal assumptions and fight for women's rights. Most notably, she always mountaineered dressed in what contemporaries considered men's clothing, shirt, climbing boots and a pair of trousers, at a time when women could be arrested for wearing trousers in public. Indeed, so scandalous was Annie's choice of attire that it prompted widespread public debate over appropriate gender behaviour and whether women should even be allowed to engage in such a rugged pursuit as mountaineering. All the while, Annie continued letting her feats speak for themselves, and in 1911 made her feelings on the subject crystal clear by defiantly planting a Votes for Women banner on the peak of Mount Korapuna, in one fell swoop bringing the suffragist movement to the attention of the world's press in a new and exciting fashion. Annie continued mountaineering well into old age, even reaching the peak of Mount Madison in New Hampshire at the venerable age of 82. Just how progressive a figure she was may best be summed up in her own pertinent observation at the height of her fame: a woman who has done good work in the scholastic world doesn't like to be called a good woman scholar. Don't call me a woman mountain climber. If you enjoyed this content, I'd recommend checking out my new book, Hollywood's Women of Action, From the Perils of Pauline to Wonder Woman, which examines the development of the action heroine as a character from the silent screen era to the present day. It's available from Amazon and other international booksellers. To purchase, follow the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.